And we'll get started with the morning session of our day 2 of improving cancer diagnosis and care. And this morning's session will run from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. We're going to be talking about the clinical applications of precision oncology, improving the translation of omics technology in cancer care. My name is Levy, and I'll be proctoring this session. I do have a short presentation to give just to level set the morning's session. I'm one of the National Cancer Policy Forum members, and I am at Vanderbilt University. We're at a juncture in clinical decision-making where we're really beginning to think about the challenges of providing precision and predictive medicine for cancer patients in this era of big data and genomic care. And this paradigm of N of one to N of all is becoming more and more relevant, as we've heard from the speakers yesterday. Here are some of my disclosures, which I showed yesterday as well, but for this particular presentation, I will reference some work that we've done that has been partially funded by Genome Oncology, Pfizer, Bristol Myers Squibb, Susan G. Komen, and the NHGRI. I think at the end of the day, we don't do this enough in medicine. We don't measure what it is that we're trying to impact. We do it with respect to clinical research as far as the therapeutic efficacy of drugs, and that's held to a very high standard. But when it comes to other types of implementation and decision support, we often just throw it out there and say, oh, we've been successful. So if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And this is really the way medicine is largely practiced, with our gut feelings and, oh, the patient I saw before, oh yeah, I've seen this before, I'm going to apply this again, and that's what happened. And so it's our experience that brings to bear so much of what an expert clinician really is. But we really do need to start to change this paradigm and start to understand the nature of implementation research, that scientific study of the barriers to and the methods of promoting the systematic application of research findings into practice. And we're going to hear several speakers today talk about their experiences in implementing precision oncology as well as predictive analytics from an implementation science perspective. As I said, we're at this precipice of change in how we think about clinical decision support in medicine. Evolving from the evidence-driven paradigm to protocol-driven care, which we're still doing much of in cancer care today. Pathway-driven has become a huge buzzword as far as reimbursements, models. And now, are we really ready for this data-driven approach? We've all been hearing about this tsunami of genomic data that has entered the clinic over the past decade. And it's really amazing to see how it's gone from single gene mutations all the way up to 500 plus gene panels. And this has spawned a whole new need for decision support in regards to which tests to order, how to interpret and report those results back to the clinician and the patient so that it's understandable to them and they can take action. And then how, as a clinician, can I take these results in combination with all the other features of the patient and my best judgment and their values and create a clinical decision that is right for that patient? Well, as you might imagine, with all this information coming into the clinic, clinicians are quite overwhelmed. And the question becomes, can we begin to use expert systems to help in this decision-making process? And the operative word is really help, because we have to actually evaluate whether these expert systems are going to do better than I would if I didn't have that expert system available. So at Vanderbilt, we've implemented a knowledge-driven system as opposed to a data-driven system over the last 9 years called My Cancer Genome. It's a knowledge-driven application that curates the clinical significance of genomic applications in cancer, and in addition to having a website, has this knowledge integrated into several clinically integrated systems that are assisting laboratorians in making interpretive reports for their specimens, as well as clinicians in matching patients to the right therapy or clinical trial. At Vanderbilt, we've had tumor sequencing of over 8,000 patients since 2010. And Of those, over 900 patients have gone on to genomically informed interventional clinical trials. And we've considered that to be a huge success based on the fact that we've largely been sequencing patients who have metastatic disease, that there's been quite a lot of clinical actionability for doing that sequencing. And there will be others on the panel today who are going to talk about their experience in a much more robust way from an economic perspective and an implementation perspective. One direction that we're going right now, however, is through a formal evaluation of clinical decision support tools for matching patients to clinical trials. And we're doing this in a randomized prospective way. We're developing a clinical trial matching application in conjunction with our partner, Genome Oncology. And we are randomizing not the patients, but the providers to receiving the clinical decision support so that we don't bias the clinician to have awareness of the fact that a particular clinical trial is available at their institution by telling them that it was available for another patient. And in this way, we're going to evaluate whether the intervention group who does receive the decision support of a trial patient eligibility actually puts more patients on studies than their peers who do not receive that decision support. So it's one way in which we can do a pragmatic study design evaluating the efficacy of a clinical decision support tool. I also just want to remind everyone from just an implementation perspective and a technology perspective that there's a couple of different ways in which you can implement decision support within your institution. There's this concept of the built-in model. Here's your lovely Tesla that has the built-in dashboard, and everything in that system is completely configured to work within the workflow of that vehicle. As opposed to the tethered model where you can bring in any device and with a Bluetooth interface, be able to do your navigation and have the audio run off of your car, right? So, now that we've just spent quite a lot of money on my new EMR, my shiny brand new EMR at my institution, everyone wants everything to be built in, right? Let's just stuff it into that one model because that's in my workflow. But the reality is that most of this complex decision support systems and these expert systems in particular, they're not going to run well inside the frameworks that currently exist for electronic health records. And so we need to be able to consider this bring-in approach, this tethered approach to decision support. But this may result in something quite different than what we're all expecting. And, you can look at this from one of two ways. Either I can, I have so many different apps that I'm using for decision support that I can no longer see through the windshield to actually drive, or we have a driverless vehicle and now everything is running with smooth automation. So it's yet to be seen, but we all know that EMR burden on providers is resulting in at least some part of the burnout that we're seeing in healthcare. And just posit to all of us who are making these new applications to try to remember that the goal is to make the system better, reduce the friction in the system, and not make it more difficult for providers to do their job. The goal is to evaluate these systems to make sure that they are actually improving the outcomes of whatever goal the system is trying to achieve, and not being too disruptive in the workflow of the providers. So with that, I just want to thank everyone, all of the panelists who've agreed to come from far away, far and near. And should anyone have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.